Hi there, I am Sarah Jane Case, and I'm the host of your new favorite show, Enneagram and Coffee. This podcast is dedicated to discussing the beautiful and hard parts of being human. We discuss the Enneagram, a personality map that is taking over the world, for increased self-compassion, personal growth, and healthier relationships. Listen to Enneagram and Coffee on the iHeart app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to Book Talk for Book Talk with Jac and Amy, a podcast where we deep dive into the writing of your favorite novels.
This season, we are exploring Sarah J. Maas's second installment in the Crescent City series.
This is Jac.
And I'm Amy.
This is part 2 of this week's episode, where we're discussing chapters 3 through 9 in A House of Sky and Breath. The views expressed by the hosts are entirely their own and in no way represent the thoughts or intentions of the original author.
This podcast is a discussion, shared to spark thought and conversation on the characters and themes of this novel.
The interpretations presented in this podcast are just a few of many possibilities. Listeners are encouraged to read along and share their own analysis of the text.
Though the hosts speak mostly within the constraints of this book, series and extended universe spoilers may be discussed with or without warning.
Explicit language, as well as themes of sex, violence, abuse, depression, self-harm, and death will recur throughout this podcast. Listener discretion is advised.
If you are enjoying the podcast, check out our Patreon for more exclusive content. You can find us at patreon.com/Book Talk for Book Talk.
So, we've already listed the reasons why we hate Tharion. Let's continue. And I think this is the thing that, I really think about. Mm-hmm. And upon reflection, I'm just like, you bastard. So Tharion gets himself mixed up with the River Queen and her daughter. Quote, her daughter as capricious as her mother and as jealous. If she was a bit of a possessive monster, it was because her mother had taught her well. He'd been a fool to not see it before he'd taken her maidenhead and sworn himself to her a decade ago, before he ever made himself her betrothed. Okay. She was a virgin.
Yeah.
She was a virgin, and he, quote unquote, took, right, her maidenhead.
Yep.
He lied to her to get to that. He seduced her. He made him her betrothed. They're engaged.
Yeah.
And so suddenly, when he's not being committed to her, she's a jealous, crazy bitch. He doesn't say that, but she's jealous. She's, so capricious. She's, so irrational. Ugh, I can't do anything.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you shouldn't be freaking doing the things that you're doing, like trying to get women to take photos of you and post it on social media. I'd be jealous too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this whole thing, he's not very self-aware.
Oh my God. Yes.
He's a little bit of a narcissist.
Yeah. I wish I knew her age, mm-hmm. and how old Tharion is. I can't remember how old he is. I doubt he's just a fresh 24. He's probably 50 or something.
Right.
And who knows how old she was, but there's a certain act of he was more mature.
Yeah.
Less naive, less innocent, and took advantage of that.
Yeah. And
yet we are meant to believe that, she's the irrational one. Okay. And then we get into the idea of shaming women. And this is I use this in everyday life. Why did I not use this in this book? Where if I meet a guy and we're on a date, and it doesn't matter what the ex-girlfriend has done, if a guy calls his ex crazy, it is such a red flag.
Yep.
Even if the girl or woman is, quote unquote, doing things that I don't like calling women crazy. That's another thing.
Yeah.
I just don't like calling women crazy. It's there's always some sexist undertones to it. Mm-hmm. There's always red flags there, but a guy would call a woman, and I've had, my ex-boyfriend, who one of the women he had dated had done things that I wouldn't have done. I don't think she didn't use her best judgment. He never once called her crazy.
Yeah.
He just was yeah, she did things I didn't appreciate or stuff like that. That's there's other ways to go about it. Yeah. And so Tharion here is shaming the mother and the daughter for I can't remember, he calls them crazy, but he calls them so many things. He accuses them for acting out and just doing whatever they want. And it's like, we find out eventually, like, and you know, she does apologize and stuff, but like, dear God, like, he puts those two women through the ringer.
Right. And I completely agree with you. You're about to read a quote that I think encapsulates this, and it's that Tharion has no accountability for his actions. He doesn't understand that there are consequences for manipulating people and taking advantage of people. And he constantly acts like the victim.
Yes.
And he is the furthest thing from that. And so, in the process, while pretending to be the victim, he also victim blames. Yeah. Right? He also blames the true victim, which is the River Queen's daughter.
Yes.
And yeah, is she annoying? Maybe. However, that doesn't justify any of the actions that he takes, especially when we get to the ball scene later on that she attends. Ugh. I hate him so much.
I hate him. He's like, and then you have the fact that like, here's a mom who her daughter is like, no, mommy, I love him. He's the one I want. Yeah, if I was a mom and I saw this like asshole treating my daughter like shit, I would treat him like shit. Yeah. I would hurt him. I would put him through whatever I can do.
I've definitely treated some of my sister's boyfriends this way.
Yeah.
In my brain.
As we should. Like, you know, it's like, oh, you're going to treat her like this? Feel my wrath. Like, she has power over him.
Yeah.
Of course. And all. Yeah. So, I feel like there's some kind of Taylor Swift lyric where it's like, you made me like this. I think it must be in Who's Afraid of Little Old Man.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, you know, I wouldn't be this way if you didn't make me this way. We all have, you know, we're all capable of our own actions and stuff, but like, take some accountability.
Yep.
So I want to go back to like earlier when we were comparing Ruhn to Tharion, and I want to come back to that. And remember, Ruhn was feeling guilty about hypaxia, right? Ruhn was like, shit, I'm not betrothed. Like, I am betrothed. I know we haven't done anything, but I know this isn't right. I'll figure it out when we get married type of a thing, right? Versus Tharion, quote, to stay on her good side had made him keep his hands to himself and cock in his pants, fins, whatever. He accepted the punishment, however unfair and undeserved and dangerous that they were thrown his way. You're acting like a spoiled little brat who does not care about women. It's like, I'm engaged and I don't get to have sex with other women. That's basically what he said. He was I had sex with her and I committed myself to her, and now I don't get to sleep with other women. Woe is me.
Yeah, he's an asshole. I do want to call out the fact that Tharion does think about Victoria, the wraith who was put in a box and was dropped in the trench, the Milano trench.
Yeah.
And I bring that up because Hunt's going to have a similar thought later on, so I'm just calling it out, reminding us that it's there. And then one last thing before we go into chapter 6, now that we're done bashing Tharion for now.
Because that's all we get from him in this episode.
Yeah, that's true. When Tharion finally finds the lead blocks that weighed down Sophie's body, he calls the River Queen to report what he's found and that the chains that were supposed to tie Sophie to the block have been unlocked. The River Queen surmises, quote, then either someone got there before us or Sophie is alive. Now, I say that because that's just one wrong assumption on top of a lot of other wrong assumptions that we've seen so far in this book, and we're not even at 100 pages.
Yeah.
And they all push us, SJM is using the narrative and these assumptions to push us towards a certain belief.
Yeah.
That Sophie's alive, that Emil is a Thunderbird, and all of it is playing against us until we discover the truth.
Yeah.
And she does a great job.
She does a great job. These are fun twists and turns. Like, Sophie's alive. No, she's not. Emil's a firebird. No, he's not.
Yeah.
So now we're in chapter 6. We are back with Bryce's point of view. And she's trying to take care of a battered Ithan. And Bryce is very overwhelmed in this moment. Quote, I don't even know where to start with this mess. She didn't just mean his face. And like, I want to keep the dynamics of Ithan and Bryce from the past book into this book. Like, I think that's really important, not just from Hunt's point of view, but like in general.
Yeah. I completely agree with you. And I think we see a metaphor for that instantly at the start of chapter 6 when Bryce is trying to find the first aid kit. She's described as rifling through her cabinet and discarding, quote, old makeup palettes, dead blow dryers, and more than that. And my first question is, why is all this useless shit under your cabinet? Like, why do you have multiple dead blow dryers?
Yep.
I think this can be viewed one of two ways, or both. All this useless stuff, old makeup palettes she's not going to use, dead blow dryers that are obviously not usable, show that Bryce is holding on to a lot of feelings for Ithan, despite the way he's treated her like crap.
Yeah.
Like, it's baggage that she's held on to.
Good point.
Flip side, the dead blow dryers and old makeup palettes are a metaphor for how their relationship is weighed down by the crap that they've said over the last 2 years.
Yep.
That they're entering this relationship and they're going to have to get through all the shit that they've done to each other for the past 2 years before they can get to the core of their relationship.
Great call out.
Thank you.
How many blow dryers do you have?
I used to have 2.
I have 3.
I only have 1. And when I moved, I downsized.
I absolutely need to get rid of them. Like, what am I doing with my life?
Do they work?
Yeah, all 3.
Oh, I'll take the ones you don't want, because I always think about having an extra blow dryer at work. Because after
you want the one that's like, it's like one's a round brush.
Oh, sure.
And you just kind of like, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So I have that one and I haven't gotten rid of it because it's like useful.
Yeah.
And then I have like an old pink one, but I keep it because it has the diffuser attachment. And I have the nice white one, which you and I both have. I should just buy the diffuser attachment. Oh, I'm happy I can give you the round one. Down a blow dryer. Thank God. I'm happy our listeners got to hear this.
I hate walking through the rain at work and then not being able to dry my hair.
And the round one's perfect for...
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay, back on topic.
Yeah.
There's a moment where Bryce, quote, hadn't been able to stop herself from shrieking about ruining the white cushions.
Yeah.
So she didn't want Ethan's bloody body on the couch. But you know whose bloody body has been on the couch? Hunt in Earth and Blood. And I think there's going to be a lot of little moments that show how much Bryce cares for Hunt over other people.
He just doesn't get it.
He can't pick up on it. No, because
it's so subtle.
It's so subtle, but Bryce is not good.
Yeah.
About, I mean, she couldn't tell Danica, "I love you."
Yeah.
Danica couldn't.
Yeah.
So they both said, "Light it up," instead. Which is, by the way, a phrase that they both Bryce and Hunt use in this book as well.
Yeah.
But I think she's so afraid of being hurt again.
Yeah.
She can't be overt about how she feels.
Yeah. It's like, hey, I'm willing to have this couch be bloody if I'm humping you. But no other way.
No, yeah. And I won't be humping Ithan so he can be on the coffee table.
Bloody couches are for humping only. We also get another comedic moment between Bryce and Hunt. Quote, "I'm sensing hostility and a good dose of male pride," Bryce said. "Throw in some stubbornness, and I think we got ourselves a classic case of stupidity," Hunt answered. "What the fuck is wrong with you two?" Ithan demanded. And it's so similar to the last time. Like, they're just riffing with each other. And it's like, again, to remind the reader, like, hey, they're super compatible. Like, they're cute. They've got this vibe between them. And I feel like it's almost now becoming a warning of what's to come in a way, where it's like SJM kind of reminding us of like, okay, they're really compatible and cute, and then just so you know, there's going to be something that's going to cause tension. Interesting.
So you're saying the humor is not supposed to reassure us, it's supposed to put us in a place of comfort so we're in more pain later?
I think it's both. Yeah. I think it's both. I think it's to reassure us of like, don't worry guys, they're going to be together. Like they're end game. But also now I fooled you into having this false sense of security.
Yeah. And there is going to be angst.
Yes.
Yeah, I see it.
So Ithan admits that he's there because he's been dropped off because he defended Bryce.
Now, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that defense. Ithan tells Bryce, quote, "Wolves don't talk shit about other wolves. The Prime called you a wolf. That's good enough for me." We've talked a lot about wolves throughout SJM's writing. Bryce is a wolf. We talked about why that's the case in the Earth and Blood season. What I want to bring up here is basically Ithan begging Bryce for forgiveness without begging Bryce for forgiveness.
And he needs to beg.
Yeah.
Like we'll get into it more in future chapters of like how Bryce wasn't there for Ithan as well, and he was going through it, but like Ithan was the bigger asshole.
Yeah.
Guaranteed.
Yeah.
We're introduced to a new dynamic between Ithan and Bryce, and that they were best friends prior to Connor's death. I don't think we got that in book 1. They are besties. And Bryce thinks, quote, Connor's little brother had once been her best friend after Danica. Fury and June had come after that. And I don't remember that feeling to be the case in book 1. Especially since it was like he was almost discussed in a afterthought way. You know, like who's going to Ethan's sunball game? You know, it wasn't like we never got the interaction of texting between the two of them. We got plenty of interaction with her and June and Fury, obviously with Danica. So, you know, it's always one of those things that kind of like flags a little bit for me. And later in a few chapters, Ethan's going to tell Hunt that, quote, Bryce was my best friend, you know, she had Danica. But I only had her. So I guess I say, do we believe this? Does this angst that we're getting kind of make up for it? So like right now, like I'm saying, like I already am kind of like, okay, we didn't really get that in book 1. However, SGM does a lot of work really initially to say, nope, these two are besties, angst. However, we then find out that like Ithan was in love with Bryce the whole time. And can you really be best friends when you're in love with them?
Yeah. So it is curious. I feel multiple different ways about this, partially because, you know, you can fall in love with your best friend.
Yeah.
But for Ithan, he was infatuated with Bryce and then became friends with her.
Yeah.
And is that the same? And I would say no. It is different to be best friends with someone and then fall in love with them romantically. Yeah. Whereas Ithan was infatuated, didn't act on it because of Connor, and decided friends was sufficient for Bryce. Could they ever truly be friends? And I don't think so.
No. I don't think so either. Like, it was almost like he was just kind of like waiting to see if Connor actually did anything.
Yeah.
And if he could step in.
Exactly.
Okay. So Bryce then does something that I don't understand. She insists that Ithan sleeps in the same bed as her. And understandably, Hunt is hurt by this. He doesn't want that. He says that he doesn't want that. He's like, he can take my bed. No. Okay, fine. Then he can take the couch. I'll take the couch. You take the couch. Like literally anything else. And Bryce just shuts it down. Quote, I'm tired and I don't want to argue. Conversation over. Hunt already feels like he can't help Bryce. Like he already feels that he is useless here. And this is not going to help with them.
I think what doesn't help is the power dynamics here. Because if you think about it, Bryce is the highest ranked person in this room.
Yeah.
She basically gives an order and Hunt doesn't argue. He doesn't like it. Yeah. There's a lot of reasons why he doesn't like it. But once she says the conversation's over, it's over. And he doesn't try to bring it back up.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that she uses that power over him doesn't help either.
Yeah. And it's just like a respect thing too. Like I know they're not quote unquote dating, but like they are. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like they're basically together. And to say, I'm going to have another man in my bed. It doesn't matter that that someone is supposedly your friend. It doesn't, that you haven't talked to in 2 years.
Right.
It's still another man that you're bringing into your bed that your situationship clearly has issues with. In no world would that be okay.
Yeah.
I just think it's really disrespectful of Hunt.
Of Bryce.
Of Bryce to do to Hunt, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, here's what should have happened. Bryce should have said, Hunt, you're sleeping in my bed. Ithan can sleep in your bed.
Yeah.
And then we can do a dirty deed. Like, let's get it on.
That's what should have happened.
That's what should have happened.
But Hunt offered to go on the couch. If you're so determined and being like, I'm scared of sharing the bed because like we'll end up doing something. Fair. He'll sleep on the freaking couch. But like the man who you want to spend time with, who you love, because she says that she loved him in the last book, you're not considering him, especially on the same night that we all find out that you're engaged.
Yeah, it's just shitty.
Yeah. Hunt tries not to feel threatened. Like good guy. Like he's trying really hard not to. Quote, he trusted Bryce, knew precisely what and who she wanted. Stupid, jealous idiot. For fuck's sake. Having Holstrom there bothered him more than that asshole Cormac claiming he'd marry Quinlan. Hunt is trying to give Bryce room. And she's just not willing to compromise with him.
She's not. But I will say, you know, Hunt's doing the work to try and not be jealous.
Yeah.
Let's think about the fact that he calls Bryce Quinlan is in his own mind in association with Cormac. He's trying to create distance. He's trying to, you know, he's trying to separate the Bryce that he loves from the Bryce that's been betrothed against her will to Cormac, because he has no control over that. Unfortunately, envy is just coming back again and again for Hunt as his deadly sin. Quote, Hunt reined in his growl of frustration. 15 minutes later, Hunt lay in his own bed, teeth gritted. It was fine, totally fucking fine that Ithan Holstrom was sharing Bryce's bed. Totally fucking fine. His bed, his blood roared. His bed, his Bryce. It's just a little matey.
It is a little matey, and it's just, you know, I'm not against it. It's fair. It's fair.
When you think about the fact that we are going to find out that Bryce and Hunt are mates in this book, it makes sense how possessive and protective he is.
Yeah.
Like, look at Rhys and Feyre in Mist and Fury after they sealed the deal.
Yeah.
This is a natural Fae instinct. And in some ways, Hunt doesn't have control over it.
Absolutely.
But it also makes sense to me why Bryce isn't into it, because she's only half Fae.
Yeah.
She is half human. So she doesn't have the same urges or lack of control that Hunt does.
I'm not Fae, and I'm still furious. Like, imagine Hunt being like, imagine if I had a boyfriend and he was like his former best friend from years ago comes in and he's like, I need to sleep in the same bed as her. Watch there be 2 injured people in that bed.
Yeah.
Like, no.
Yeah, it's fair.
Yeah. So now we get into Bryce's reasoning. Quote, she wanted Ithan right where she could see him. It was as simple as that. Wards on this place or not. She wasn't about to leave him unguarded when Sabine and Amelie might change their minds about the paperwork being too much trouble. She'd lost one Holstrom already. All right, I quote unquote get it. Still bullshit. And it's moments like these where I'm like, I get why people think Bryce is being selfish in this book.
Yeah.
Because I think this is a really selfish call. And a few chapters before, she called Hunt her team.
Yeah.
This is not team-like behavior. She's the one who was like, well, we're the team. We're the beer pong champions. You just threw your team member out real fast. You became the coach and you said, nope, no arguments. And actions have consequences. This is the start of that.
I completely agree. I mean, Bryce even flat out admits to Ithan that Hunt holds grudges.
Yeah.
I just don't think Bryce expects Hunt to reverse that and hold it against her.
Yep.
Right? She acts like she is infallible. She cannot make a single mistake. And it is a little bit frustrating.
Yeah.
And I don't blame Hunt for getting as mad and bent out of shape as he does sometimes.
Yeah. And who knows? I'm very curious to see if I ever feel like, if I've decided she's figured it out, redeemed her, being like, wow, that was a mistake, but we'll get there. People have issues with Ithan, and I'm reminded why. While in bed together, whispering in the dark, Ithan says, quote, in reference to his brother, he thought you were his mate. And then Bryce says, in the wolf sense of the word? And he responds, what other sense is there? Yeah, the wolf sense. There were several definitions of the term mate, though Bryce supposed that to Ithan, to a shifter, only one mattered. One's true lover, predestined by Erd. Okay, so I was like trying to find it in book 1, but I swear there was a moment when she was describing mates in book 1. Fae mates were just a slight notch above commitment-wise than wolf mates. I can't remember. I couldn't find it. I swear that's what I remember. But let's say for argument's sake that this is the case, right? How manipulative is it to be like, hey, by the way, my brother decided you were his mate. My brother thought you were, that's the only opinion that matters.
Yeah.
Not what you think. Something that would be so obvious if someone was mates. That's what my brother assumed. So like, fuck you.
Yeah, fuck you and your relationship with Hunt.
I'm going to roll over in this bed. Dick. Okay, chapter 7. We're back with Ruhn, and he's with his dad defending Bryce. And we're just like really getting the taste of like all those different POVs. Like we are hopping around.
I love it. I love multiple POV. I also want to call out that this is another Earth and Blood beat. Ruhn had to go to the Autumn King, was told to search for the horn and keep an eye on Bryce.
Yep.
But you know what? This is a million times worse than that.
Yeah, but he's like, it's worse and better. Like, he's defending
Yeah,
Bryce. Like,
yeah,
he's
it's
coming
true,
in
it's
to be
true.
like, hey, what do you think you're doing? Don't marry her off. Like,
Yeah.
he would never have done that in book 1.
Yeah.
He's willing to step up for Bryce.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
King Daddy. So going into this, I'm going to remember, unlike season 1, where I was like, SJM, what are you doing? He's not evil. Like, so reminder, we were like halfway through season 1 being like the first book of Crescent City before the 3rd book came out.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I was really holding on to that Autumn King is good.
Mm-hmm.
I am accepting that he is not good, and I am embracing this. So I will no longer be looking for clues
Okay.
of that sense. Good news, it's pretty easy to prove that he's evil.
Yeah, yeah.
Once you start looking. Don't have to look too hard. So we'll just continue that. He's a piece of shit.
He is. And that starts with Bryce earlier, trying to think through how the Autumn King is acting against her and what he's anticipating about her. SJM's trying to undo what she did in Earth and Blood, because I still stand by the fact in Earth and Blood he seems to really care about Bryce.
Okay, thank you.
Nevertheless,
Yeah.
very, very quickly, SJM's like, let's backtrack all that shit because he's not a good guy.
No, yeah.
And let's start with the fact that information is power. And the Autumn King, and by the way, we're never going to use his name because
I'll never
we don't
remember
respect
it.
him.
No. 2 different reasons.
The Autumn King never told Ruhn about Hypaxia's background or her relatives.
Mm-hmm.
He tells Cormac, quote, "It didn't seem necessary. My order is law." But then he proceeds to look down on Ruhn for not having the information.
Right?
Quote, "His father's features tightened with distaste, as if disappointed that Ruhn hadn't learned it himself. Like, Ruhn cannot win.
Yeah.
He will never be able to win anymore because he is lowest on the Autumn King's priority list now because of Bryce. The Autumn King is a dick, but I do have to point out a moment where he and Bryce are similar. Like, he says something that makes me think of Bryce immediately.
Okay.
When Cormac disses Hypaxia's background and says his father found it problematic, the Autumn King retorts, quote, "Then it's a good thing your father's not marrying her." It's such a Bryce thing.
It is a Bryce thing. They are similar.
They are very similar.
I'm going to get into like the real topic of their conversation. And that is basically sex is ownership. We know this because that's basically like, you know, everything in their world is like that. The Fae males own the females. We see it with how the Autumn King thinks. Quote, "Last my spies reported, she still does not bear his scent, so I can only assume they have not consummated their relationship." And that's Bryce and Hunt that he's talking about. And it's like, he's so unbothered about her, where it's like, another man hasn't claimed her yet, so she's fine. They don't really care. Not that it would stop him.
Right.
But it's like, oh, well, how important is she really if another man hasn't had sex with her?
Yeah.
Because clearly there's no other way for a relationship to be committed without sex. Like,
Right.
Obviously. Okay, sure. Asshole.
What if one of them was ace? They're not, obviously, but
like, yeah, like that shouldn't be the defining factor.
right.
People. It comes down to who can claim Bryce and how.
Yeah.
Another quote from the Autumn King. Quote, "Your sister has one value to me, her breeding potential. Both our royal houses will benefit from the union. Sex means ownership, sex means control, sex means breeding."
And who does that remind you of? Reminds me of Kier and the Autumn Court High Lord from the ACOTAR series and how they treat Moore.
Yeah, I mean, there's something about the autumn and breeding. It's not even a good breeding kink.
It's not.
You know, like, I'm all for a breeding kink book. But this ain't it.
This is not
This
it.
ain't it, people. By having Ruhn marry Hypaxia, a witch, and Bryce marry Cormac, a fae, the Autumn King shows whose power he respects more.
Mm-hmm.
Quote, "It's about ensuring the Fae retain our power and birthright," his father said. His icy voice had always belied the merciless flame in his blood. "Your sister can imbue that into her offspring with Cormac." So, like, he sees Bryce as salvation and not Ruhn, which is like, she shows up, has more power than him, turns out to be this starborn badass. And immediately the Autumn King is like, okay, you're going to be used for breeding. Here's this wonderful, amazing power, and the only good she has is to breed.
Yep.
Now, this part actually is kind of funny to me. Cormac tells Ruhn, quote, the Starborn used to intermarry, brother wed sister, aunt married nephew, and so on, all to keep the bloodlines pure. Since you seem so heavily interested in who shares Bryce's bed, perhaps old traditions could be revived for the two of you. And my note was like, oh, so he read book 1.
I'm so glad you bring this up because I have a lot of thoughts about it. Mm-hmm. I want to point out that when they're talking about Bryce and Hunt not having had sex yet, mm-hmm. Ruhn thinks, quote, just talking about this, Bryce and Hunt's sex life with his father was gross.
Yeah.
And Bryce had a similar thought when Cormac arrived, and Cormac tells Ruhn, you smell like Hunt. And Bryce is like, ew, gross, I don't want to think about this. And I feel like SJM planted those things before the suggestion for Cormac that they intermarry, just so that she could prove, like, hey, guys, this is not happening. I know you simped out during Earth and Blood. It's not an option here.
Like, why add so much sexual tension between the siblings just to have them turn out to be actual siblings? You were going to do some kind of plot twist. They're not related by blood situation.
Yeah.
Why make it so tense? Yeah. So it's just funny.
I just want to put that out there.
It will always be our inside joke with all of our listeners of like, they're the real love triangle.
Yeah, they really are.
Ruhn, Bryce, and Hunt in book 1.
We'll be right back.
Amy.
Yes, Jacqueline.
The secret's out. I'm not a natural blonde.
Oh my gosh.
Which means I need to take extra care with my hair. It's so fragile, and I really have been wanting to do a silk pillowcase because I've been hearing all of these amazing things that it can do for your hair. That's why we partnered with Blissy's award-winning 100% mulberry silk pillowcases. And why has no one told me that it's naturally cooling? Because I've been out here living my life with a hot pillowcase. It cools me.
Amazing. Who doesn't want a cool pillowcase?
It's both physically cool and like cool, you know? I've definitely tried out different types of sleep pillowcases, but Blissy's award-winning 100% silk pillowcases, you can tell the difference. This is a high quality, fantastic silk pillowcase.
A lot of people might avoid silk because they think they have to dry clean it. The great thing about Blissy's 100% mulberry silk pillowcase is not only is it award winning, it's washable. It deserves an award when it's washable.
When I got the pillowcase, I was worried. I'm like, oh, great. Now I'm going to have a pillowcase that I'm just going to reuse over and over again and pray that it doesn't get too dirty. And I did not realize that Blissy's pillowcases were washable. I know that sounds dumb, but I really thought that I'd have to go take my pillowcase to the dry cleaners.
I don't blame you.
I am obsessed with these pillowcases and everyone loves them. They have a ton of different prints available and color, and they make great gifts for everyone because there's literally an option for everyone. Men love them too. My mom and stepdad are going to get them because they don't want to share, and I think that's romantic. They also have over 1 million raving fans, and you could be next too because I'm not even joking, we are as well. Try now risk-free for 60 nights at blissy.com/booktalkpod and get an additional 30% off. 30% off? Watch me as I go buy an entire new set of bedding with this 30% off. That's Blissy, BLISSY.com/booktalkpod. BOOKTALKPOD. And use code booktalkpod. So that's BOOKTALKPOD. And get an additional 30% off. Your skin and hair will thank you. And then you're going to come and thank us. And we'll say, we told you so.
Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles. And that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because you know I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like, my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.
So, remember in earlier chapters when I said that Bryce was thinking like the Autumn King? Well, when Ruhn questions the Autumn King's motives, he says, quote, "That you have to ask shows you're no true son of mine." And Ruhn is a sweet baby boy. Let him be. Leave him. Let him ask questions.
Yeah.
There is no dumb question.
Yeah, that's right.
We are safe here.
Unless you're in front of the Autumn King, then you're not safe.
Apparently. And we'll get more into Bryce and the Autumn King throughout the book, but just he's a piece of work.
I just want to say the Autumn King gives me Lucius Malfoy vibes, like fan fiction Lucius Malfoy.
Yeah.
Just putting that out there.
Yep, I can see that. And we also start to get hints about the abuse that Ruhn went through. Quote, "The words seared through him. Nothing could ever hurt worse than what had already been done to him by this male. The scars he bore on his forearms from it, mostly covered by the sleeves of his tattoo. But the words, yeah, they stung." And we know that the Autumn King burns Ruhn, right? Like he caused burns essentially when Ruhn was a kid.
Yeah.
And he abused him with fire. But it's kind of interesting because he ends up being healed by fire in a way because Lydia has fire to her. That's her power. So I just kind of thought that was like, all right, that was a little funny.
Yeah.
Not funny, but just like, that's kind of cool.
It is very cool. We'll have to discuss that when we get to Flame and Shadow.
Yeah. Yeah. And then finally, the last quote of this chapter where I'm like, fine, I guess the Autumn King isn't cool. He says, quote, "Cormac has always been the son I should have had rather than the one I was burdened with." And it's like, fine. Okay, he's evil. SJM, you proved it.
Yeah. And, now that we've read Flame and Shadow, the end of this chapter when the Autumn King says this, I'm like, yeah, this is important to remember because it explains why Ruhn does what he does.
Yeah.
And how the Autumn King dies.
I agree. I think she decided Ruhn kills the Autumn King in this book when she was writing this one.
Yeah.
I'm not entirely convinced that she knew that would happen in book one.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's why we see a change in the Autumn King from the end of Earth and Blood to the start of Sky and Breath. Not only is he threatened by Bryce, therefore marry her off so she can't do anything, it makes sense that she's like, yeah, there's got to be a lot more tension between the Autumn King and Ruhn to make Ruhn's journey believable.
What I think is cool, if you think about it, right? What we were comparing was Autumn King from book 1 to book 3.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a jump.
Yeah.
When you look at Autumn King from book 1 to book 2, it's a jump, but it's reasonable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
She's doing a lot of groundwork here to make up for like endearing him in certain ways, but at the same time, like, he was still enough of an asshole to be like, okay, well,
yeah, this makes sense.
So when you compare this Autumn King to book 3 Autumn King, it makes sense. So it's just kind of a fun thing when you think about of like, okay, book 1 Autumn King, book 3 Autumn King, 2 different people.
Yeah.
But this progression, I can believe.
See, and it just reminds me that at the end of Earth and Blood, you kept saying the only way to make Flame and Shadow make sense is if Sky and Breath does the work. And Sky and Breath has a lot of work to do.
And this is one of those things where I can see the path of it doing the work.
Yeah. Yeah, this is one element.
One element of a lot of stuff. The next day, also known as Chapter 8, Hunt gets ready for work to meet Celestina, and he is nervous. And Bryce, I love it's sweet.
It is very sweet.
She offers to go with him to work
Because she wants to protect him.
Yeah. And like she wants to protect him, but it's also so kiddish too.
Yeah.
Now, Hunt, though, he doesn't get threatened by this. Instead, quote, "There it was. Something in his chest kindled at the offer. No hand-holding needed, Quinlan, but thanks." Bryce's eyes glowed, pure Fae predator lurking there. "You might be headed into work without me today, but I'm a phone call away." His chest ached. She'd do it. Back him against a fucking archangel.
I just thought it was cute that something kindled in him, like a candle lighting. It's just really cute.
It is cute. Because Hunt has never been defended or looked after, right?
Yeah.
But Bryce has. So she knows how to do this because that's what she grew up with.
Right.
And Hunt is going to try to emulate this protectiveness, sometimes too much, at the detriment of. And his way of showing love is to match her. Keep that in mind.
Which makes sense because he's never been in a true loving relationship.
Yeah. I mean, like, he's never like seen love, never anything. So here's the first time that someone's being true and loving. And he's like, so this is what you do.
Okay, I will do it.
And I will do it better and more. And
Sounds like me.
Yeah, it does. That's funny. And it's like, okay, buddy. Like, that's funny.
What I think really endears Hunt to me in this moment is that Bryce is still so much his lifeline to reality.
Yeah.
Quote, "Her grin was brighter than the morning sun streaming outside the windows." Now, in season 3, when we talked about Wings and Ruhn, I talked about sons and mates being connected. And I think we see that here with Bryce and Hunt again, that she is always his son. She is always the thing igniting the fire in him. Just, again, getting that reassurance that, you guys, they are endgame. They are going to be together. On the flip side, though, when she leaves, when she disappears at the end of Sky and Breath, we see the impact of that. We see, Hunt is in prison in Flame and Shadow. He goes to a really, really dark place. He feels like he has to take on the Umbra Mortis again. So Bryce is really essential to Hunt's survival. And when you think of it like that, it makes sense why he goes over the top with how protective he is. It's not just for her sake, it's for his sake as well.
Absolutely. Like she is his lifeline. And that's not healthy.
No, it's not.
But like, it is what it is at this point. So
Yeah.
Gotta deal with that.
Yep.
When Ithan and Hunt are left alone, it just turns into a pissing match, which I'm just like, Ithan, what are you doing? Like, you don't get to come in here and like stake a claim. Anyway, Hunt wants to understand why Ithan is there, right?
Yeah.
And Ithan tells Hunt, like, Bryce is my only friend. That's why I treated her like shit for 2 years. And, like, you don't get to be 2 years off as a friend and then treating her like absolute crap. And you don't get to come in and claim, like, your spot. Maybe this is me, but it feels like almost like a smugness, like, I'm her bestie. I got to sleep in bed with her.
It's very childish.
Very.
Ithan is still very much a child.
Very. When Hunt points this out, right? Like, he kind of points, like, out being like, hey, man, you were gone for 2 years. Like, what are you doing with this? Ithan then kind of turns it around and goes, well, my brother was in love with her for, like, 5 years.
Yeah.
So what makes you think that you're going to have a chance? Because, again, for Ithan, his brother is the end-all, be-all.
Yeah.
His brother was in love with Bryce. Therefore, no one else had a claim. His brother thought they were mates. So, like, everyone respect that.
Yeah.
It's an ownership of her because someone else loved her, essentially. And it's like, there's no consent, no consulting her feelings, none of that.
Yeah, her feelings don't matter.
No, like, he's so focused on, like, his brother was in love with her for 5 years rather than she didn't want him for 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And she gave in a moment of weakness.
Yeah.
Right before his death.
I get that.
Yeah. So I want to talk about this exact scene that you're talking about, Jac, about Ethan's pissing contest with Hunt. But I want to talk about it in the context of Syrinx as metaphor for this scene. So in Earth and Blood, Syrinx represented Hunt. We talked a lot about that during that season. And now, because of this scene, I can't decide if Syrinx represents Ithan or if Syrinx represents the envious side of Hunt. So I'm gonna play both of these things out, and you tell me which one you like better. When Bryce leaves to get ready for work and Ithan and Hunt start talking, quote, Syrinx scratched at Hunt's calf, and Hunt hissed, absolutely not. You had one breakfast already, probably two. Syrinx flopped down beside his steel bowl and let out a whine. Now, this is when Ithan and Hunt start getting into it, and Hunt threatens, like, if you bring trouble to Bryce, I'm going to hurt you. Mm-hmm. Now, by denying Syrinx food, and if Syrinx is Ithan, we can see this moment as metaphor for Hunt trying to exert his dominance over Ithan, right? By threatening, like, don't bring trouble to Bryce. And that's metaphorically depicted through Hunt denying Syrinx food. Food is power. Or if we think of Syrinx as Hunt's envious side, by denying Syrinx food, Hunt is trying to overpower his feelings of jealousy. Mm-hmm. And he chooses to do that by exerting dominance over Ithan. What were you going to say?
I love both of it. I love what you're saying there. I think there's elements of both. When you say Syrinx represents Bryce, I think Bryce isn't there. Yeah. Syrinx is her pet and stuff. And I think that there's something you can say of like, you've like, haven't you had enough? Like kind of almost like to Bryce, like you know, you've been so indulgent. Like you have me and you have him essentially, like, and you have Cormac. Like, isn't this enough?
Yeah.
And he caves into Syrinx just like he caves into Bryce. Yeah. And there's a jealousy factor. So I think it's like everything you said, and you can almost say it can be. I mean, that's interpretation.
Yeah.
That's analysis, baby. Where Syrinx could be all of them.
Yeah, and to further that point, when Ithan tells Hunt, quote, Connor was in love with her for those 5 years, 5 years, and by the end of it, he'd only managed to get her to agree to go on a date with him. You're at month 5, bro. Good luck to you. And this is when Hunt is feeding Syrinx. He caves. He's like, fine, I'll feed you. So feeding Syrinx could be metaphor for giving in to Bryce. It could be metaphor for feeding the jealousy beast inside Hunt. Yep. Or it could be metaphor for letting Ithan win this pissing contest. Just lots of options.
There's a certain amount of maturity to Hunt, because he doesn't say anything like, hey, by the way, that couch where you're sitting on, I got her off there.
Yeah, it's true.
Do you know what I mean? Like, did your brother and Bryce ever kiss? Because boy, did we.
Yeah.
Did Bryce ever tell your brother that she loved him? No, because she did with me. So, like, you know what I mean? Like, he could win if he wanted to.
Yeah, and that's where Hunt being more than 200 years older than Ithan
really helps. It really helps when you have like a 22-year-old, 24-year-old, and a 200-something-year-old.
Yeah.
So now we're back with Fae. We're back with Bryce, and she's at the Fae archives, and she's thinking about Lahaba, and that just sucks. Like, it's heartbreaking. I don't need the reminder. You don't need the reminder. Lahaba dead. We don't need this anymore. Please go back to that episode where I sobbed.
Yeah, and I laughed.
Laugh. Where I sobbed. Evil chipmunk laughing at my pain. So Bryce, though, as she's thinking about Lahaba, she also thinks about Hunt and how, like she's got to talk to him, and she, he's been there for her emotionally, and she's able to talk it out with him. So for Bryce, Hunt being there emotionally is what she needs.
Yeah.
Not overbearing, not the protector. She needs that communication from Hunt.
Yeah.
And she shows that's like her way of showing love to Hunt, is being that communication to him. And it's like neither of you two are like taking this communication completely as it should be.
Yeah.
The exchange of how to love and love.
Yeah, I bring that up at some point where like they both like to give love in the same way.
That they like to receive love.
Well, they both like to be protective of the other.
Yeah.
But they both like to protect. That's their expression of love. But Bryce likes to receive love through communication and talking, not through protection.
Yeah. But I think that's how she projects her love to him, of saying like, well, I offered to be here. I offered to do these things. Like, isn't that enough for you? Versus Hunt is receiving that physical protectiveness, and he's like, well, then I shall physically protect you too.
Right. They're just, they just need to have a conversation.
They can go to therapy. That's what they need.
Yeah. Now, going back to Lahaba, because Jac doesn't want to, the mere atmosphere of the archives grates on Bryce's nerves. Were you done?
Yeah, I'm done. Yes, we're just going down this path.
Yeah.
Okay.
So why does the atmosphere of the archives grate on Bryce? It's because it's the complete opposite of the time that she had with Lily in the gallery.
Mm-hmm.
This moment helps us see that Bryce is still in mourning. She's still going through the stages of grief. And that's important. Like, she's not in the greatest mindset like we might have thought a few chapters ago. Quote, why was Lily's life any less valuable than Bryce's? Lily had been the better person, had suffered for decades in bondage. The fire sprite should be free, alive and free and enjoying herself. I think this thought process is important for us to recognize it for Bryce, because as she progresses throughout her own journey of taking on her power, accepting her power and her destiny, I think Lily is the gold standard to which she holds herself. She's going to try to emulate Lahaba. Mm-hmm. And that's why for Flame and Shadow to end with Lahaba's presence is going to be so important, because Lahaba is going to be who Bryce wants to be.
Yeah. God.
Ugh.
Ugh.
I gave myself goosebumps.
Can we move away from her now?
Yes.
Okay. May we not talk about Lahaba again.
Sure.
Until
Flame and Shadow.
Until Flame and Shadow. May we never come back to this. So Bryce is on the phone with the queen of my heart, Jessica. And they're talking about the Autumn King's motives, right? Mm-hmm. Ruhn doesn't get it. Hunt doesn't get it. But who gets it? Jessica. A woman understands. Quote, males will always try to control the females who scare them. Marriage and breeding are their go-to methods.
Love Jessica.
Yeah.
She's right. But you know what? Bryce isn't really listening. She's just drawing hearts with BQ plus HA in them.
Yeah.
Which, Q, again, reassurance.
Yep.
Bryce does, in fact, love Hunt. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, she's not taking Jessica's conversation as seriously as she could.
Yep.
Because the conversation's about her power.
And back to the 7 deadly sins comparison, Jessica asks Bryce what she plans to do about the Autumn King and Cormac, and Bryce says, quote, pretend it's not happening until I can't any longer. I was given an order by the Asteri to lie low forever. And again, she's sloth. At least at the beginning of the book. Then
we'll see
where she goes. But right now she is definitely sloth.
Instead of leaving this for the breadcrumbs, I want to call out something that Jessica says to Bryce, because I think it's important for us to mark these moments. Mm-hmm. Quote, you killed an archangel without access to that power. I imagine that you can now do a great many things, Quinlan. Now, Hunt had a similar thought a few chapters ago. I did put that one in the breadcrumbs. But I call this one out because SJM is doing the work to say, we haven't seen the extent of Bryce's power, and we're probably not going to see the extent of Bryce's power in this book, which is something that we had complaints about with Flame and Shadow. So
but there's a lot of hinting in this one.
There is a lot of hinting in this one. I think it's important that we pay attention to it to see if Flame and Shadow becomes more believable.
And when you have a book that hints at it the whole entire time, it does make Flame and Shadow believable.
Right.
But even if we don't see it, but the hinting is seen.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Also, why does Jessica tell Bryce to think about the advantages of marrying Cormac?
Because it goes into what I'm about to complain about.
Okay. Complain away.
Thank you. That's what I do best. So now we've entered chapter 9. And Bryce is on the phone with Hunt at the start of chapter 9. And what Hunt receives from Bryce is that protectiveness again. It's what I was saying earlier, right? So Bryce is trying to give that emotional support the same way that he is giving her emotional support.
Yeah.
Quote, if he was able to laugh today, good. She'd do whatever she could to keep a smile on Hunt's face. And that's the problem, that I've been seeing here, is that they aren't hearing and seeing what the other person needs or what they're giving. So, Bryce is busy trying to give Hunt all this emotional support. Hunt's not really, picking that up.
Yeah.
So he feels more like he doesn't have a place in her heart.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you're calling that out, because these two are obviously so committed to each other. Yeah. They are so in love with each other, but they end up pushing each other away with their different expressions of love because they don't take the time to figure out what the other person actually wants. Mm-hmm. And I think I want to take this moment to say that Bryce and Hunt are a lesson for why communication is important in in a relationship, and why compromise is important in a relationship. Yep. Just a personal story. My partner told me very, very early on that her expression of love is quality time. Mm-hmm. And I had to learn how to accept that expression of love without demanding the other things that I wanted.
Yeah.
And then eventually introduce like, hey, could I ask for this too, please? Can I ask for this as well? You know, but at least we communicated about it.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of people just get mad about, I think about my parents who are divorced. Like my mom would get mad that he never loved her in all these other ways. All he did was spend money on her. And I'm like, I would like that too.
I know. And that's the thing. Like, you have to ask for your needs. Like, that's nothing will survive if you're not asking for your needs. And it's just like, you know, there's almost like 4 different things happening, right? It's how you express love, how you receive love, how they express love, and how they receive love.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think I saw something about like, you know, like the different forms of love is a little bit more limiting, but the concept remains, right? Yeah. Where it's like, okay, well, this is how I express something, right? So I can express love in a certain way, but if that's not how they receive it, it means nothing.
Yeah.
So that person then has to realize when I'm doing X, Y, and Z, I'm expressing love. But then I also have to recognize if they want to understand expressing a love, I have to do it in the way that they understand.
Yeah.
And then vice versa, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, it really does come to a way of communicating, of being able to say like, this is, and I've done that in past relationships too, of like, I'm doing this because I care.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm cooking for someone because I care for you, and this is what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I did to you.
I'm
I'm like, you're having a time. I'm cooking for you.
You come over and you cannot help.
This is my aggressive love. Sit and eat.
It's which I appreciate.
Yeah.
And I think why I bring this up is because SJM's other relationships in other series feel too easy.
Yep.
Where Bryce and Hunt are really going through a very normal process for early relationships.
So normal. So normal. This is the most normal relationship we've had, to have this type of like communication error.
Yeah.
Of like, they were both loving one another, but they're not doing it in a way that
the other
one might need or understand or
right.
Yeah.
Right. So I just want to put that out there because, you know, a lot of people point to Sky and Breath and say Bryce and Hunt aren't mates. Mm-hmm. And no, they're just going through the early they're just
doing a healthy relationship.
Yeah, they're going through the early and normal growing pains of a relationship.
Absolutely. So when all this to say, now it's about to get unhealthy. When Cormac walks into the archives while Bryce is on the phone with Hunt, she lies to Hunt and is like, gotta go, bye. And this is like, she didn't need to lie to him. But she did, right? And it's like, was this even a secret necessary to keep? Like, I'm sure she's like, if I told him, he'd be freaking out, and oh no, like, I'm just doing it for him type thing. But like, this is how it all snowballs.
Right.
Stop keeping secrets. Now, this is where SJM is trying to trick us with a love triangle, at least initially, right? Because we're only in chapter 9. Cormac brings up the prophecy and basically says that the oracle said that their fates are aligned.
And I have thoughts about the prophecy, but I'd leave it for the breadcrumbs.
Lovely. Cormac then is checking out Bryce's star. And it's like, or is he checking out her boobs? It's like, no, he's looking at the star, right? And then he tells Bryce that he doesn't prefer tamer females when she's like, oh, you just want a female to tame. And he's like, I didn't say that, baby. He doesn't say it like that, but in my mind he does. So why does this whole fake love triangle not work for me? There's never really a threat. And I know you say that, like, you know, maybe there was never meant to be a threat. But Bryce and Hunt are meant to be. Like, SJM does want us to think like they are OTP, right?
Right.
And Cormac does not present the threat. So does the lack of what's at stake really help, like what romantically really help or hurt the book? Because we've talked about this before where it's like, her second books with her other series really has a lot at stake romantically, right?
Yeah.
We have Kale and
Aelin,
and then we have Farrah and Rhys falling in love. Like, there's a lot at stake romantically, and we don't in this book.
Yeah.
Like, you know, them not having sex, it's a fake thing at stake, right?
Right.
Then Cormac coming in and there's this love triangle. It's a fake thing at stake.
Yeah.
And it's meant to be seen through, but not. But yes, but no, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think what I actually really like about this is, as I've said before, I don't think anything is really at stake with Cormac. I don't think she actually goes for a love triangle. And the reason I say that is because the real tension is all in Hunt's head. And I think that's what's at stake, is Hunt and his perceptions and interpretation of what is happening around Bryce. And that feels very realistic for any relationship that you're new in, that you don't feel secure in. What's at stake is not this person who just walked up.
Yeah.
What's at stake is your interpretation of that person who's walking up. And I think the stakes are really with Bryce and Hunt being able to communicate.
I can see that. I just feel like she added so many, we'll call it red flag triangles, or love triangle red flags.
Yeah.
You know, like there's a certain flirty element to it. There's like sex has been introduced, as I'm about to get into. And she did initially, there is a love triangle that she did present. Cormac is engaged to Bryce. That is a love triangle.
Yeah.
Classic love triangle.
Yeah.
That is put there. Absolutely. She strips it down pretty quickly, kind of to the points what you're saying, like what's at stake. It's hard. I go back and forth on it a lot. Like I know this is me putting my preference onto a book that's not it.
Yeah.
And so I have to remove myself. And I know that a lot of other readers are like that too, where it's like, you know, there's like a whole thing of like, there's a reason why people thought that Bryce and Hunt were actually mates going into the third book, because you had someone like Cormac come in, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, or I was rooting for cat daddy, you know, like there's a lot of things happening, but this is where it's like we have to listen to the text and remove our preference.
Right. And I think by doing this, I feel like SJM is trying to subvert the trend of the second book.
Yeah.
In her storytelling.
Yep.
She's trying to do something different, and it relies on the reader's ability to see through what's happening. Mm-hmm. And I understand your thoughts about preference. Like, if you're going to do a love triangle, make it high stakes for me.
I'm like, make Cormac the real love interest. And again, that's what she set up for us, is to meet that second guy in the second book and to be like, I want you.
Yeah, and instead I think SJM is testing us as readers. Like, can you, like Hunt, get past all these things and acknowledge the true connection that is here?
Yeah. Yeah.
I did want to point out that a reason to not vote for Cormac in this love triangle, quote, I don't know why I expected a half-breed to be as docile as a pure-blooded female. So not only is he talking about Bryce to her face in the third person, he's also talking about her as if she were a dog.
I'm not saying he's perfect, Amy. What I'm saying is he has an accent.
I just find that really unacceptable.
Yeah, no, it's great. He's putting on a fake show. You know.
Okay.
Innocent until proven more guilty. So there's, you know, we're coming back to sex, as, you know, as I do, because, you know, feminist lens. And once again, sex is used as leverage. Bryce lists off all the reasons why, you know, she's like, this isn't gonna work, right? Like, I don't want kids with you. Mm-hmm. One, because I don't want kids with you. Two, because that would require sex to have kids with you. And then, quote, his lip curled upwards. I think you'll find the first part to be rather enjoyable. And this is where it's like, sex is meant to be tempting. Sex is meant to control. It's like, you're going to love sex with me so much that you're going to do something that you don't want to do. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I'm up for the challenge.
I don't doubt it.
And then Bryce continues to not claim her Vanir/Fae side. She says, quote, I like being considered a person, not livestock for breeding. The Fae are no people of mine. So it's like, of course she hates the Fae, right? Like, you have everything that happened in the first book mixed in with what's going on now, where it's like, oh, by the way, the Fae who treated you like shit in the first book now recognize you and want to treat you like cattle.
Yeah.
No wonder, right? Mm-hmm. And it also makes sense where it's like, you know, she's not going to claim a power until she can own that power.
Yeah.
And that's why it's going to be a little like, that's her journey. And then Cormac does tell Bryce at one point, quote, you're mortal now, as well as starborn. Time to act like that. And it's true. Like, I don't think that what he said there was meant to, because right now he's sussing her out to see if could be an ally.
Right.
You know, like, you know, keeping in mind what he's actually doing is like to get where she stands.
Right.
With things.
Right.
And I feel like that's such a, like, I think he's saying that not as like, hey, you're starborn, time for you to start acting like, a woman who's ready to breed. Time to start acting like someone who is ready to step up in their role of destiny.
I agree with you. And the fact that she's not ready, right, and she's demonstrating that to Cormac right now, reinforces the idea that she's in this sloth, deadly sin category. All she can do is reject her heritage and reject that destiny. She wants nothing to do with it.
Yep.
But it's not like not pursuing that is making her any happier.
Yeah.
I do want to say, though, that throughout this conversation, I do feel like Cormac is projecting onto Bryce. At one point, he says to her, quote, "Like I said last night, you don't have a choice." His voice was flat, his eyes hollow.
Oh, yeah.
He doesn't have a choice either.
I was about to be like, I don't think he's Okay, yeah, you're right. You're right. That is a projection.
We then shift to Hunt's point of view, and we start with him in Celestina's office along with Isaiah and Naomi. And Celestina asks them to please sit. Now, please, I don't think is a word that comes easily to SJM books. I think she uses it with weight.
Strategically.
She
with
uses
weight
it,
is a great way of putting it.
She uses it strategically. We talked about this. I can't remember what season. I think it was
2.
I think it was Mist and Fury. That Feyre didn't like using the word please. She had to learn to use the word please. It comes across as a sign of weakness to use the word please. And I think that's important to start this scene off because we're going to see Hunt second guess everything that Celestina does. He's going to convince himself that Celestina is putting on an act. Yeah. And the use of please, I think, is meant to feel like an act here. Just putting that out there.
And I think it's important to remember, Celestina's not evil.
Yeah. No.
She, betrays them for her partner.
Yeah.
If there's anyone who can get that, it's Hunt.
Yeah.
And she comes back around in the second book, like, Celestina's not a bad...
In the third book.
That's the one. Celestina's not a bad person. So I want to talk about Celestina's appearance real quick. Quote, "She wore pale pink and lilac robes, gauzy and ethereal, and the silver jewelry along her wrists and neck glowed as if lit by the moon. Where Micah had radiated dominance and might, she shimmered with feminine strength and beauty." Celestina, weaponizing the feminine. Like, this is very, very popular for women in this particular series to do. It's her armor. Yeah. Her armor is bringing down other people's armor. Yeah. Because she's approachable and she's feminine, right? She's ethereal. And it makes us not trust her. Yeah. It's such a funny thing where it's like, this is one of those moments where like, she looks feminine. I will not trust her. This reminds me of Ianthe and Akatar. It is funny how as a reader, SJM is almost like flagging our own biases. Yeah. Oh, she's hyper feminine. You're not going to enjoy her.
Well, and like hyper feminine women can't be in charge. Like, that's a bias too.
Yeah. And it's not just like it's hyper feminine, but like in the almost girlish sense, right? It's pink, it's lilac and everything. And even though Bryce is feminine, she's sexually dominant. So while her femininity is there, it's a dominant femininity versus this ethereal, this gauzy. There's almost like a passive femininity to it. And that's where it's like extra, like, considered weak and stuff. Where it's like, you dumb fools.
I want to layer on top of that, Hunt specifically notices that Celestina is voluptuous and lush-bodied. Now, I think those are words I would also associate with Bryce. Not that Hunt has ever thought those about Bryce. But somehow Hunt seeing Celestina as that makes her more of that hyper-feminine and therefore weak.
Yep. Which is like, you should know better, Hunt.
He should. And yet... I do want to call out that Hunt thinks about Victoria, or Vic, as they sit in Celestina's office. Quote, "Hunt didn't dare mention Vic or beg the Archangel to pull her out of Milano's inky depths, to spare her from a living hell. It had been months. Odds were that Vic had gone insane, was likely begging for death with each moment in that box." I just asked myself, then why not put her out of her misery?
There's an answer, guys. There's an answer.
Yeah. It just, I call it out because Tharion thought about Victoria a little bit. Hunt thinks about Victoria here a little bit. And then there's never a mention of Victoria again.
Until the third book.
But they still do nothing about her.
Exactly.
And it just feels like a cop-out.
Is it a cop-out or is this SJM doing a commentary on men? Oh, I guess I should do that. All right. Oh, it sucks for her. Shit. All right, we should do that later sometime.
Why doesn't Bryce think about Victoria?
Not her problem.
Yeah, it's fair.
Bryce probably doesn't really know about her.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah, that happened away.
Yeah, it's true.
That's a Hunt thing.
That is a Hunt thing.
We shouldn't put that on the woman.
That is a Hunt thing.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to also recognize we see Hunt with his PTSD being triggered throughout the conversation with Celestina, and he projects those experiences onto Celestina as well, which causes his mistrust of her and causes us as readers our mistrust of Celestina.
We are such gullible people.
We are so gullible.
Yeah.
Quote, he'd always hated his owners who disguised their dead souls in pretty speeches. This could easily be part of a game to get them to trust her, Celestina, come limping into her soft arms and then spring the trap, make them suffer. While Celestina is talking about and mentions preferring other, quote, systems my fellow archangels prefer, or not preferring the systems my fellow archangels prefer, torture and punishment and death. Hunt blocked out the sear of white-hot iron rods pounding his back, roasting his skin, splitting it down to the bone as Sandriel watched from her divan. It's pretty graphic.
Very.
And we get that in our first meeting of Celestina, so no wonder why we're like, yep, Hunt, we agree. We don't trust her either.
Yeah. And then her betrayal at the end is just more of like, we knew it was coming.
Yes, she is evil.
Yeah. It's like, or she just was in love. Again, titles and dynamics, they are coming back into play. Celestina insists that they call her by her name and not your grace, while Hunt wants to be called Hunt and not Orion, because he says only his mommy can call him Orion.
Yeah, which is fair.
Shunning titles and names, like that's what they're kind of doing, right? They're shunning a title, they're shunning a name. And I think it's meant to compare the two. That both of them are like, because it's like a really quickly where it's like, don't call me Grace. And then Hunt's like, don't call me Orion. They are similar.
Yeah.
Celestina betrayed people for her partner.
Yeah.
Hunt, Bryce would let him, would betray everyone
for her.
For her.
It's true. And they get along later on in the book for a reason.
Yeah.
They do have a lot in common.
Yep.
And I think in another life they could have been friends.
I think in the next life they can, it's like, still this life. I think they have potential.
They have potential. I also want to acknowledge on the topic of titles that Celestina calls Hunt, Isaiah, and Naomi by both first and last names. Mm-hmm. Like she's very deliberately calls them by their full name. And I think it's Celestina's effort to acknowledge them as individuals and to show them respect, but it reads very awkwardly to me.
I don't like it when you call me by my full name. I mean, I do, but sometimes I'm in trouble, so I can't tell. You've never busted out a Jacqueline Celine at me.
I have not.
I think once you have.
What if I said your full name?
I don't think you can pronounce my middle name.
Luthgarda?
Exactly, you can't.
I tried.
Luthgarda?
Oh, Garth.
Luthgarda.
But it's spelled with a D, right?
Yeah, but we say it with a Spanish accent.
Got it. Anyway, we're going to cut that out.
No, we're keeping it.
You want your full name on display?
They can find me.
Yeah, it's fair.
I'm a public figure.
At one point, Hunt observes that Celestina is, quote, elegant as a swan. Now, let's think about swans. That's not an intimidating animal.
Bullshit.
You're thinking geese.
No, I'm thinking swan.
Oh, they are pretty aggressive.
They're horrible. I get what you're saying. We'll lean into it, but I want to I've been punting in a river in Cambridge, and I would that swan came after us. We had to punt our little heart out to get away.
From afar,
swans
seem very docile.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
They preen a lot.
Yes.
Right? And that feels like Celestina right now. Mm-hmm. And it also brings back that hyper feminine comparison. Yep. Swans are a symbol of hyper feminine in my mind.
Yes.
So I don't think Hunt sees her as powerful, but his instinct is telling him otherwise because swans are aggressive.
Swans are evil.
And he has PTSD that tells him
archangels
are aggressive.
Yeah.
Going back to something we said earlier, Hunt doesn't trust Celestina, and we don't either. When Celestina says that she'll treat Isaiah like a free man and fight for his freedom, along with allowing him to live outside the barracks, Hunt thinks, quote, Celestina couldn't be serious. This had to be an act. And I think the swan facade is an act. The please is an act. And that narrative is going to repeat itself over and over again so that we similarly don't trust Celestina. And I think we don't trust Celestina even as Hunt begins to trust Celestina.
Because at that point, we've set it up to be like, oh, we shouldn't trust her. Like, immediately, all these men manipulating the way we view women because we're in their POV.
Yeah.
I don't blame SJM. I think she does a great job with it.
She does an excellent job.
But, like, screw these guys.
Yeah. One last thing before we jump into Breadcrumbs. Just before the big reveal of the merging of Micah's and Sandriel's Triari, Celestina mentions, quote, the Asteri's communication minister is not usually one to make mistakes. So apparently the letter informing Hunt and company of the news of the Triari formation never got sent to them or got lost. But I'm going to say, this is the first time I thought this, it probably never got sent to them, and it was probably Rigelus's doing, or it was probably Pollux's doing. One of the two. One of the two.
Or, because at one point Bryce says, I wonder if he knew about Celestina coming, and that's why he planned this whole engagement thing.
I honestly think Bryce gives the Autumn King too much credit.
It's one of those when it rains it pours. It's called a book, Bryce. You're in it.
Yes. All right, let's get into some breadcrumbs. In Chapter 4, Cormac says to Bryce, quote, I might be Ruhn's cousin directly through his mother's kin, but your father, King Einar, is Fae, and his line once crossed with ours long ago. I bring this up because it explains how both Bryce and Ruhn are starborn, even though it's technically through Ruhn's mother's line. Because Ruhn's mother is the one descended from Helena.
Yep.
Just saying that.
Who's one of the princesses, starborn princesses. I'm like hitching my finger that way. Yeah. The other princess. Also in Chapter 4, Cormac says to Ruhn, quote, rumor has it the sword sings for my bride too. Just a little bit of destiny and foreshadowing for Bryce to seize the sword someday.
In Chapter 4, Hunt thinks about Bryce's power, quote, she'd blinded people with that power, and that had been before the drop. With all the magic backing her starlight, he hadn't yet seen how it would manifest. And we're not going to see it until Flame and Shadow.
A lot of teasing of her power in this book. Still in Chapter 4, Bryce sees, quote, Ruhn who'd leaned against the banister with crossed arms, his blue eyes blazing into a near violet. And later, Ruhn speaks to Bryce with his eyes glistening like stars. Like, dear Lord. Sounds like a certain High Lord that we all know he looks like.
Yeah, we missed it.
I missed it in this read. I'm happy you caught it.
In Chapter 4, quote, they meandered home, and despite Bryce's flippant words, she found herself slipping into a state of roiling darkness and thoughts like shooting stars. She'd been a fool to think that she could lie low forever. She'd been willing to follow the Asteri's order to lead a boring normal life, but the rest of the world had different plans for her and Hunt. Destiny tends to be portrayed like shooting stars in this book. Just putting that out there, and it foreshadows their journey ahead and the involvement of many people in that journey.
In Chapter 6, quote, Hunt's lightning seemed to crackle in the air around him, or maybe that was Hunt's presence, once again doing funny things to her senses. SJM always likes to give little reminders that Bryce and Hunt are connected, even in the presence of a threat, aka Ithan. I think it's also like their powers are just connected.
Yeah. In Chapter 6, Bryce thinks at one point, quote, gods, how many messages had she and Ithan swapped over the years? How many juvenile jokes had they shared? Just hinting at Ethan's true feelings for Bryce.
Seriously. In Chapter 6, during Bryce and Ethan's conversation about mates, Bryce thinks, quote, to a shifter, only one definition mattered, one's true lover, predestined by Erd. The Fae had similar concepts. The mate was a deeper bond than marriage, and beyond an individual's control. The similarities are hinting at the Fae that both of them are Fae.
Yeah.
Because they're both Fae.
In Chapter 7, quote, the experiments and nonsense he worked on day and night boiled and bubbled away. That's the Autumn King working on things to prove that there are multiple worlds.
In Chapter 7, Cormac tells Ruhn, quote, our fates are the same. Unknowingly to him, they will both be in Orpheans, but they'll be Orphean spies. Ophian spies.
I thought that was ironic.
Yeah.
In Chapter 8, Jessica says to Bryce, quote, Ruhn Danaan is one of the few who's ever been strong enough to shun what he is. It's a clue that Ruhn is very ready to give up his princely title in Flame and Shadow.
In chapter 9, when Bryce researches Celestina, quote, she found no hint about any romantic entanglements because her relationship with Hypaxia is very, very secret until Bryce and Hunt will stumble into them.
I thought that was a
it's great.
Nice little breadcrumb.
Yeah.
In chapter 9, Bryce notices, quote, a tattoo of strange symbols encircled Cormac's left bicep, black ink gleaming in the bright lights. Weird marks, perhaps?
Don't do this to me. People think they are word marks, yes. And that's why people think that he survived.
Oh.
You're just fueling the flames. No, it's okay. No, because it's a good point. Because they are word marks. That's what we all agreed upon. He could get out. Okay. Anyway. And finally, in chapter 9, Cormac tells Bryce, quote, the Oracle of Avallen said I was destined to unite with a princess who possessed a star in her heart, that our mingling would bring great prosperity to our people. I mean, he's not wrong, but not the way that Cormac interprets it. Unite under the same mission, mingle, as in hang out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's single and ready to mingle.
It's true. It makes me want to have thoughts about stuff. Amy, got a question for you.
Yes.
How does perceived ownership over Bryce impact her and those around her?
Well, it sets everybody off into a tailspin.
It's the book.
It is the book. You know, I think that I do find it curious, and to your point that you've said throughout this entire episode, there's ownership, and ownership of Bryce specifically is a very, very huge theme that we're getting right now. And I don't like it.
Yeah.
And I don't like it. And but I do appreciate that that everyone else is upset about it. That it does, it does bring everyone's priorities into question. I do think that that's good because no one likes it.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah, that's what I got. Not much of an answer.
It kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, where it's like, I like the topic of people owning Bryce, I think, or owning women in general, right? It's more than it's about Bryce, but it's about women as a whole.
Yeah.
It's a larger commentary. I need to be sold that this is done correctly.
Yeah.
Because if it was truly just about like owning Bryce, because it's not about women, it's about Fae, the laws. They talk about like, these are the laws that, the Fae have. If it was truly just about Bryce, then, this whole story and her being the only woman in the whole book, like, it'd be fine. I get it. And people might be saying, like, what about Juniper and Fury and Jessica? It's like, they're not in this book like that. You know, like, we don't have the way that Hypaxia or Ruhn or Tharion and Ithan, like, we get all these other perspectives. We get all these other storylines. We don't get other storylines from women. Yeah. And it's very frustrating. But at the same time, you think about in the book, who's also owned Hypaxia, Lydia, Celestina. Celestina is about to be married off and being forced to have sex with someone in order to have a forced baby.
Yeah.
So, like, there's things happening in the background. And right now I'm realizing with this conversation and something we said earlier about Cormac and the love triangle is that I really need to step back as a reader from what I'm expecting and read what is in front of me.
Yeah.
So when it comes to how does perceived ownership over Bryce impact her and those around her, it's huge. I need to accept what I'm seeing and not what I want to see.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the case for all of SJM's books, right?
Yeah.
And it's easier for the ones that have been written for a while and we're more distant from, whereas the Crescent City series is newer. We've experienced the slow release of these books, so we come in with expectations that we can't use or let color our interpretation of the book.
Agreed. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Book Talk for Book Talk with Jac and Amy. We encourage you to rate and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening platform. Next week, we'll be exploring chapters 10 through 13 of House of Sky and Breath.
We would love to hear your thoughts based on today's conversation. You can submit your comments to our form at booktalkforbooktalk.com for a chance to have your feedback discussed during a future mini episode or on a Patreon exclusive episode.
If you're enjoying the podcast, please visit our website, booktalkforbooktalk.com, to view our latest merch and learn about supporting the show through Patreon or Venmo.
Bye.
Woo!
We did it.
Was that 20 pages?
Yeah. I really thought I didn't have a lot to write.
You need to stop having those thoughts because that's when we have the most.
What's crazy is that the page count is the same as last season. Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because you know I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.